Good afternoon to you. 306 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, in the wake of all of those terror attacks this week, Kyle Seraphin, former FBI agent, host of this Kyle Seraphin Podcast, will join us at 3:30 to discuss the latest, including the government's response to these attacks. James Rosen is here at 4 o'clock, chief White House correspondent for Newsmax. He'll assess President Biden's response, including the fact that when Joe Biden stepped up to a microphone last night in Camp David, he had injuries on his face, mysterious injuries. The White House not giving any answers on this, but James Rosen has been digging. He joins us at 4 o'clock for answers on the final days of the Biden presidency. Philip Wegman will be with us from Real Clear Politics at 4:30. And then at 5 o'clock, we talk immigration and the ongoing risks to the country with Todd Bensman. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. As we kick 2025 off, 2 terror attacks taking place in different cities across the country. New Orleans, of course, this awful attack where an Islamic extremist rents a Ford F-150 Lightning, that is an electric version of the Ford F-150, and then turns up Bourbon Street during New Year's celebrations and takes off right down the street, killing 15 people and injuring so many more. As people are running out of the way of this vehicle. And remember, being an all-electric vehicle, you're able to basically accelerate at a much higher rate than you would with an internal combustion engine. And you can see that if any of you have had the misfortune of actually seeing the video as the guy swings past a simple police barricade and then right onto Bourbon Street into the most densely packed area of the French Quarter of New Orleans, blasting through all of those people, does it instantly at a very high rate of speed, given that he's driving an electric truck. And he rented this thing on an app called Turo, which is basically an app that allows people to rent their private vehicles out when they're not using them. Additionally, I should point out about this guy, he's an Army veteran, served at Fort Bragg, had IEDs that were with him and he planted. And then pause on that story for a moment, and then we go all the way across the country to Las Vegas. And it was there at the Trump Hotel that in that same time frame where you have another soldier, an Army soldier, park a rented Tesla Cybertruck, that would be another electric truck, rented on Turo, the very same app, right in front of the doors to the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. And then police now say, as of today, they're telling us they believe that he shot himself in the head immediately before the explosions started going off. He may have began the detonation, lit the fuse, shoots himself. This is what you're most likely to walk away believing based on the series of events. And then the vehicle explodes there, a terror attack. And thankfully, given the integrity of the steel that vehicle is made of, there was no meaningful damage outside of the car. There were some injuries, but it seems like everyone's going to be okay outside of that vehicle. Even the glass on the front of the Trump Hotel was undisturbed. The logo in front of the Trump Hotel undisturbed. It's just a big explosion right out in front of the building, most of which fired up into the air through the glass and through that kind of rear housing that contains the bed of the truck, that plastic portion up top. All of that blown away, but in the aftermath, you see that vehicle. It is practically an advertisement for a Tesla Cybertruck. The vehicle's integrity, otherwise completely maintained. The vehicle is just sitting there. The steel, it looks the same. And the FBI is now saying, they were saying yesterday they were trying to establish whether or not these events are connected, those two. Joe Biden said yesterday they're trying to assess whether or not these events are connected. And now, as of today, the FBI is saying no connection. No connection. Now, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if we examine the motivations to the extent that we can, one, the attack in New Orleans, the guy is clearly a jihadist. He posted apparently videos to social media in advance of the attack declaring his intention. The FBI now claims it has all sorts of evidence. They believe that he was radicalized some time ago and began expressing ISIS sympathies some time ago, beginning last summer at least. And he had an ISIS flag in the car during the attack. So those are pretty clear indicators of intent insofar as you're going to affix them to your vehicle and post them to the internet. And meanwhile, the guy in Vegas, he takes one of Elon Musk's prize vehicles, the Tesla Cybertruck, and he detonates it right in front of the Trump Hotel. And he's also been apparently on social media and telling people that he wanted to recruit people for the war in Ukraine. You begin to see, okay, maybe these guys both had their own individual demented motivations for what they did. But still, the coincidences here are really Turo, the same exact app for both of these trucks. Both of these are electric trucks, EVs. Both attacks took place on the same day. Both attacks involved improvised explosive devices. Excuse me for seeing some connections here. But that's where we are. That's where we are today. The way all of this information rolled out, beginning in New Orleans here, let's just focus for a moment on that. The local FBI official, Alethea Duncan, pops out in front of a camera with a nose ring in and begins telling everyone that this is not a terrorist event.
Kirkpatrick said we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this event. This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found. And we are working on confirming if this is a viable.
Do you think she just messed up? When she says this is not a terrorist event? Did she mean to say that? Was it all the cameras and the pressure of the moment that she said something that was so absurdly false? I don't know.
Device or not. As Chief Kirkpatrick said, we're asking everyone to stay away from Bourbon Street, specifically from Canal Street to St. Anne. That is my ask. Once again, stay away from Bourbon Street, Canal Street, all the way to St. Anne until we can figure out what is going on.
Now, just a few hours later, Joe Biden stepped up to that microphone at Camp David. Again, injuries to his face, slurring his speech. And he did say that what he's hearing from the officials are that this was absolutely a terror attack. This guy was inspired by ISIS.
The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill. The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack.
Okay, so it's a terror attack. I mean, how much evidence do you need? You didn't have to go far. It was found in the vehicle. Although Joe was cautioning everybody, hey, don't jump to any conclusions about all of this.
The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack. Possible explosives were found in the vehicle as well, and more explosives were found nearby. The situation is very fluid, and the investigation has a preliminary stage. And the fact is that right now, there you go. The law enforcement and intelligence community are continuing to look for any connections, associations, or co-conspirators. We have nothing additional to report at this time. The investigation is continuing to be active, and no one should jump to conclusions.
Don't jump to any conclusions. Don't be judgmental about the terrorists who just attacked our country. Hold your breath. Maybe we'll find out what happened. Here's what's up today. Aisha Hasni over at the Fox News Channel has some reporting on this subject on what the feds are saying now. Remember, the guy who committed this attack in New Orleans has been identified as Shamsuddin Jabbar, 42 years old, a U.S. citizen from Texas. He attended a local mosque, which is now alerting its membership not to speak to the press at all and to refer all inquiries to the Council on American Islamic Relations. That's CAIR, which is an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trials, in case you're wondering. Aisha Hasni today on what the feds are saying about the attacker.
Something that they just learned was that apparently the FBI is claiming that they had no intelligence on Jabbar before this attack. They had zero intelligence on him. It appears to be so that they were not tracking him.
No, they were too busy chasing down parents in school board meetings and saying that the Catholic Mass celebrated in Latin is considered radical. We've got to focus on that.
Also, the FBI told these members that he was, quote unquote, inspired by ISIS, but they do not have evidence to lead them to believe that he was directed by ISIS. They're still looking into that, but so far they told members today that he was inspired by the...
What does that even mean? He was inspired by ISIS, but they have no evidence that ISIS was connected to him. So he was just watching the ISIS YouTube videos. He wasn't on the ISIS message board. What are you saying exactly?
This terrorist organization, not necessarily exactly directed by this terrorist organization.
And now they're saying today, this is all over the place because they started with yesterday saying, the FBI official saying, it's not an act of terrorism, and we believe that Jabbar is connected to other people. That's what they told us yesterday. Now they're saying it is an act of terrorism, and we believe he's not connected to other people. This is a complete 180 on both storylines. They sent in one of the top FBI officials today to replace the nose ring lady because apparently she wasn't doing a good enough job. So he steps up to a microphone today, and I swear to you, this is her real name. His name is Christopher Wray. Christopher Wray, not to be confused with Christopher Wray. Nothing, just Christopher Wray. A different person. Christopher Wray today had this to say.
Online platform.
Oh, excuse me. There's the act of terrorism line.
First and foremost, let me be very clear about this point. This was an act of terrorism.
Despite what my colleague told you yesterday.
It was premeditated and an evil act. This was obviously a critical incident, and with that, lots of information and tips come pouring in from law enforcement, first responders, and the public. We have been aggressively running down these tips and information. As you all know, that takes time, and we will continue to do so until every lead has been followed through on. This investigation is only a little more than 24 hours old. So I ask you to keep in mind that as I go through some of the specifics later. But at this point, currently, and this is another fact I want to be clear on, we do not assess at this point that anyone else involved in this attack except for Shamsuddin Jabbar.
All right, so now it's just him. Now we've shrunk it down to just him, nobody else. He seems to have been inspired, no evidence that he was driven by ISIS, and on and on. I don't know what the point is of all of this comfortable distance for ISIS, but that's what we're getting. They also say that they've assessed that Jabbar had at one point wanted to attack his own family and friends, but he was worried that it might distract the media from his core message, which he shared all of this on social media, the FBI guy says.
Online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. There were 5 videos posted on Jabbar's Facebook account, which are time-stamped beginning at 1:29 a.m. and the last at 3:02 a.m. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament.
All right, so he joined ISIS before the summer. Not on the FBI's radar. He's posting all over social media about how much he loves ISIS, though. And what is the FBI doing during this period? What have they been focused on? The single largest investigation, pursuit, prosecution in the history of the United States Department of Justice was what, January 6th? Are you serious? Where the only people who died were Trump supporters? And yet Jabbar is running free in order to mow people down in New Orleans. And also, where were the vehicle barriers that are supposed to be up there on Bourbon Street? One of the most heavily populated streets in the entire United States of America. Drunk people all over the place. Everyone's just walking over the road. There are vehicle barriers that are supposed to be up there. They say they were being repaired. It was a 3 to 4 week window of time that the bollards were being repaired in advance of this year's Super Bowl, which is going to take place down there. What? At this very moment, they were down. And so why not substitute the bollards with mobile vehicle barriers? More on that in a moment. The incompetent police chief in New Orleans, a woman who was fired from her job in the same job in Oakland, California, now running the show in New Orleans. People are saying she looks like, the grandma from the Beverly Hillbillies. She really does. It looks like Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the police chief in New Orleans right now. More on that madness in a moment. There's a lot of craziness going on here. So Jabbar, the terrorist, takes that Ford F-150 Lightning and takes a right turn on the Bourbon Street, right past a police cruiser, which was only blocking a small portion of the roadway. And then he goes right down the sidewalk, right into this crowd of people and kills 15, injures so many more. Where were the bollards there? The bollards were apparently down for repairs ahead of the Super Bowl. But there are other options when you're trying to protect an event like this, including mobile barriers, which apparently New Orleans has but didn't deploy. In fact, today, those barriers are now out. And New Orleans Police Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick, who looks like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, was asked about this. Hey, why are these out now, and where were they before? Take a listen.
So right now, I can declare to you that the Bourbon Street is open.
Chief, where did those archers come from?
Sorry?
Those yellow archers, where did they come from?
Actually, we have them. I didn't know about them, but we have them. And so we have been able now to put them out.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't know we had this resource, but they're out now. Yeah, well, what good is that doing? After the attack? After the attack? Why weren't they out in the first place? This Ann Kilpatrick character is something else, too. She, just a few months ago, she hit 2 people with a car when she was driving through the French Quarter. This is what it sounded like. WDSU, the local news outlet, reporting on the police superintendent.
Initial reports show that Superintendent of Police Ann Kirkpatrick hit 2 pedestrians. A woman was taken to the hospital for treatment. The man says he was not injured. The superintendent reportedly took a breathalyzer and urinalysis. The breathalyzer returned a result of 0.00. The urinalysis results will be returned, we're told, within a few days. Again, this is a breaking, developing scene.
She wasn't even drunk. She was just hitting pedestrians, completely sober. That's the police chief in New Orleans. Also, she was fired from her old job as the Oakland, California police chief in February of 2020. Oakland Police Department Chief Ann Kirkpatrick, the NBC Bay Area reported at the time, has been fired after 3 years on the job, the Oakland Police Commission confirmed late Thursday. The decision to remove Kirkpatrick as the city's top cop was unanimous and was made during a closed session meeting. The head of Oakland's Police Commission, Regina Jackson, said she made the motion to dismiss the chief. Quote, there are a lot of improvements, but the disparities continue to exist, and there are a series of other issues that have just contributed to losing the confidence. We didn't think she was going to be the most effective chief in Oakland. Real pros running the show down there in New Orleans. Not a big deal. She goes from Oakland to New Orleans. These are 2 dangerous cities, unfortunately. And I don't think Grandma's doing a good job of keeping things in order. Might be time for her to be fired again. Coming up, Kyle Seraphin is with us, former FBI agent. He'll react to all of the latest details on these terror attacks and the response from the feds. Stay with us. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 3:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, James Rosen joins us from Newsmax at 4 o'clock. We'll talk about Joe Biden's slurring speech last night, but he had face damage for some reason, and the White House is refusing to give any details about it. James tells us all the stuff that he's learned at 4 o'clock. At 4:30, Philip Wegman will be here from Real Clear Politics. And at 5 o'clock, Todd Bensman from the Center for Immigration Studies. We talk about the ongoing threats from our nation's border, which are real. There's A lot of problems. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Additionally, President Biden is speaking this hour from the White House. If we have any highlights from that, we'll bring that to you coming up. But first, I want to bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's a former FBI agent, host of the Kyle Seraphin Show podcast. Kyle, Happy New Year to you. Thanks for coming back on with us, sir.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Vince. What a way to kick it off, I guess. Huh?
What a way to kick it off. Just your first reaction to these two terror attacks, Kyle. What do you are you first of all, are you surprised that they took place, and what do you make of them?
Well, I guess a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. I was kind of hoping for a couple of days off to hang out with my kids and go walk through the fields and do dad stuff.
Yeah.
And instead we get dragged back into the news cycle. So Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the business here. But, different dates have a lot of meaning for certain people. And if you read things like what Gavin DeBecker has written and things like The Gift of Fear and talking about the mosaic model of threat analysis, I know the Secret Service has used these types of things. People put different weights on certain anniversaries, on their birthdays, on the anniversary of a death of a colleague or a loved one or something that happened overseas.
Sure.
And New Year's is one of those big dates. It's just like it means something and it might take a bigger place in someone's mind than you could expect. And so when people see big dates and they want to make news, then sometimes that's the time to do it. And unfortunately, we're dealing in a world where people choose violence and they choose to express themselves in a way that I think is wildly inappropriate, totally antisocial, and horrific. But this is the America we're in today.
So these two attacks, though, we're talking about in New Orleans and Las Vegas. Yesterday there were quite a few people, and myself included, who were wondering the extent to which they were connected, given some of the similarities. Some you may say they're superficial, but man, a lot of coincidences here. Both using electric trucks, both with IEDs, both soldiers, both guys rented the vehicle from the same exact app, Turo. And both chose that date, as you point out, in order to conduct their attacks within hours of each other. From your distance, as you look at this as a former FBI agent with a trained eye for this, do you suspect any connection between the two events?
Not on the onset, I don't. I'm totally open to being wrong. We're working in a wild area of speculation with minimal facts. But the idea that somebody had been at Fort Bragg at the same time as another guy, which is one of the connections, they were both from the Army. There are millions of service members. They are not connected. I might have been at Fort Bragg at the same time that these guys were for a little bit.
It's a big base.
That's like saying they were in theater in Afghanistan. It's like we had, tens of thousands of troops, if not hundreds of thousands deployed around the world. These are superficial connections. The idea that you might connect because of an app, there's obviously tens of thousands of people that make the app profitable. I've got a friend who rents out 6 cars on there. So it's a widespread possibility, whether it's EV specific. It's interesting that they chose it. I think it will be interesting to look at it as it gets further in the line. But those superficial, they don't necessarily mean connection. In fact, I would work from the opposite perspective.
Okay. Yesterday, we were given a bunch of information by FBI officials that today they've 180 degrees reversed on the New Orleans attack. Yesterday, we were told that that attack was not an act of terrorism by a local FBI official by the name of Alethea Duncan. Here's what she said yesterday.
Kirkpatrick said we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this event. This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found.
Okay, so that this is not a terrorist event, and then she describes IEDs, which sound like terrorism to me. And then the other piece is yesterday she said that they believe that the attacker, Jabbar, was working with other people and that they're hunting down all of these leads. Today, the FBI is saying, we don't believe that. We believe he's a lone wolf. What to make of all of this from the FBI?
It's really embarrassing to look at, I think, from the outside looking in. I had people reach out and tell me that her background was in healthcare fraud. She showed up wearing a fleece kind of hoodie looking outfit. She's wearing like this kind of coverall that says BAU, which got a lot of conspiracy people going down the line. That's the Behavioral Analysis Unit. And I don't know if she worked there or if she dated someone that worked there or if she had a friend and she got it in the CERG gift shop, which is the Critical Incident Response Group that is the program, division that has this part of the Bureau. All of that looked bad. She walked out with a nose ring. That's sort of, I guess that's the new Bureau. It's not the way that things should be done, but it just led people down all these other roads. The cautious answer is always it's an ongoing investigation. We're just getting involved. We're going to be the lead agency. We don't have a lot of details. We'll get to you and we want to do it. The real issue I think that the Bureau has, and I think this is going to face any new director, I hope it's Kash Patel, is that the Bureau has basically lost a lot of credibility and they don't have the ability to walk away and not say things anymore. If they walked away from the thing, everybody assumes it's either a cover-up or that they're lying to us. They reverse themselves. But one sort of rule of public affairs is you don't go out and make statements you're going to have to backtrack 24 hours later. If you don't have the information, especially if you're an investigative agency, you can always shut your mouth. It's always an option to say less or nothing. You can let someone else say things and you don't have to contradict them. And it was pretty clear based on even just the Twitter followings that I'm sure you and I have on there, where we're seeing pictures of an ISIS flag. You're seeing the names drop very, very quickly.
Yes.
And you also had what? The chief of police say, this is a terrorist attack. And then she basically described a terrorist attack. Now, she might be hiding behind a kind of a semantic argument that we don't know what the ideology is. But it looked like the evidence response team on the ground were able to pretty much at least say, it has the outward appearance of a terrorist attack, and we will revise that later when we have more details. That would be the smart way to go. We just don't have that. She looked terrible in front of the camera.
Yeah, that's for sure. So what do you read from the fact that FBI official, Alethea Duncan, she speaks yesterday, but today the briefings are instead being led at the same place in New Orleans by Deputy Assistant FBI Director Christopher Rea, who just showed up today, and he said this almost like a kind of a backhanded, just giving her a slap for her statement yesterday. Listen to this.
First and foremost, let me be very clear about this point. This was an act of terrorism.
That strikes me that he's trying to say she was wrong.
Yes. I think you're right. I think that's what you're seeing. Look, the Bureau's like everywhere else, right? They're not 100% professional, or they're not professional all the time. That's why you had a girl out there say the word pacifically when she meant explicitly or specifically. You just got someone who didn't belong in front of the camera. It was probably an off day, if you had to bet. I mean, it's January 1st. It's a public holiday. I think the special agent in charge was on vacation and out of the area.
Yeah.
So you got the B crew, and the right answer would have been, don't say anything.
Right.
Vince, I've been on scene before where I was the only FBI personnel there, and I was a low-ranking guy. I'm just like a field agent, and I'm standing there, and I'm surrounded by a team commander for a SWAT team in Arlington, right across the river from you. There were people there from a task force that were all the operational commanders of this thing, and they're serving a search warrant, and they're going around the corner, and they go, okay, SWAT team's going to do this. This is what the local PD is going to do. Here's where the perimeter is. We got U.S. Marshals on standby. FBI, do you have anything to add? And the answer is nope. Where do you need me? That's it. I don't have to say anything. We have this instinct when you see these FBI executives, whether it be a GS-15 level like the ASAC you're talking about, or a deputy assistant director going in there. They all want to get this like media time, but they're not good at it, and they don't really know what they're doing half the time. And so a backhanded smack like that, trying to say like, now I'm the one in charge.
Yeah,
that's a personality thing. It's really actually embarrassing, because how about just say it? You don't need to go out there and correct the person.
Yeah.
We had different people on yesterday. We've got more information today. We want to definitively say this, and we apologize for misleading the American people.
It's a sign.
If you own it, nobody's going to be mad at you.
It's a sign that it needs a much better leadership culture, for sure. You can definitely detect
for sure.
that. Okay, so let's talk about the FBI and their priorities now, because today they're saying they've learned so much about this terrorist in New Orleans, and he was he's being radicalized. It seems he joined ISIS just before last summer. He's got all these social media posts indicating that he was going to conduct this attack. They know everything now, but they're saying that previously, though, he wasn't on the FBI's radar. The FBI wasn't tracking this guy. But we know through whistleblowers, people like you, Kyle Seraphin, that the FBI's priorities have not been Islamist terrorists. They have not been trying to prevent the very kind of terror attack we just saw take place in New Orleans. They've instead been tracking school board meetings and going after Catholics who celebrate the Latin Mass, or the feds have been literally tracking Tulsi Gabbard's air travel instead of being obsessed with stopping these types of murders. What do you make of the priorities here?
I'm just shaking my head along as you're saying each one of these individual bullet points, because they're all spot on. They're all examples of a concept called opportunity costs, right? It costs something to assign people to investigate. You have a finite number of FBI agents. There's less than 14,000 total agents. A lot of them are in administrative roles. So your investigative force is even smaller than that. And if you're going to divide your resources along the lines of going after January 6th defendants, particularly people who are nonviolent, and you're going to make that a big priority, if you're going to go after Catholics, if you're going to go after parents, you're going to necessarily lose focus on what's called international terrorism. There are two sort of branches of FBI terrorist investigations. One of them are called domestic terrorism, the other one, international terrorism. And I know for a fact, because I had whistleblowers come to me and say, how do I get this to Congress? we are having a real problem right now. We've had senior members of the program, so either section chief level, this is like a GS-15 or an SES position, coming in and trying to tell us we need to cross-reference all of our domestic terrorism cases and see if we can find if a January 6er was in a chat room or a Reddit thread or commenting on the same post as somebody from ISIS or Al-Qaeda, because we need to get our numbers up on the international terrorism side. That's how badly they were keeping track of this. And most people don't realize this, but the FBI does a thing called TURC. It's like the time utilization record-keeping system. Kind of like an attorney bills hours to cases, FBI agents bill their hours to specific threat priorities. And they were so far upside down going after domestic terrorism in late 2022 and I think early 2023 that they were in danger of losing $300 million of federal funding that Congress specifically points to international terrorism. So we knew the priorities were off. And if you've been following this, this has been just sort of like I was just waiting. I've been holding my breath for quite a while. I'm very disappointed to see it come true, but I'm not surprised in the least that this has happened. And I don't think this is even, I don't even think this is a preview in any meaningful way. We're just getting started. They haven't even closed the door on the southern border yet with this Biden administration.
Yes.
And why would you start kicking off the fun, quote unquote fun, when you still can get people on the field? They are still fielding the types of folks that can do this stuff, from whether it be overseas or ideologies moving in material
Yes.
for folks that are already domestic. We're just getting started in this. I think we're looking for a very Western 2025 is the way I've been describing it, which is kind of wild and scary for everybody, especially in urban areas.
And Biden officials, to include Joe Biden himself, have been saying that the real threats to this country are whatever left-wing fever dream of the moment needs to be satisfied. So, for instance, here's Joe Biden saying that we don't have a terror threat from ISIS or Al-Qaeda. It's from white supremacists.
Terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists.
Alejandro Mayorkas also said basically the same exact thing.
And what we in the Department of Homeland Security have assessed is that the greatest terrorism-related threat that we face in the homeland is the threat of domestic violent extremism. Individuals drawn to violence because of ideologies of hate or false narratives propagated on social media and other online platforms. And the most prominent threat is the threat of white supremacists.
These are dangerously unfocused people, Kyle Seraphin.
That is a really nice way of saying that. I think they should never be able to show their face in polite society after saying these obvious lies. It's so disgusting. Anybody who's out there and working on the white supremacy threat, which I've done cases of them, they almost always turn out to be some 22-year-old kid who's like tweeting things that are racist, is wearing khakis and boat shoes, and he's sitting at a Starbucks with a polo shirt on. And the closest he gets to violence is maybe, he has bad breath when he's ordering his latte. It's just not real. There are far, fewer numbers of these things than they would let on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the opportunity cost is that we've done something really awful by allowing these people in. I'll tell you this. I sat in a Twitter space last night, which is not something I like to do all my time, but spent a couple hours talking to a woman named Sarah Adams. And anybody who listens to the Sean Ryan show, they've probably seen her before.
Yeah.
She's prior CIA. Sean Ryan, former SEAL, sitting in there as well, talking. And the concept of politicized intelligence came up. And I'd never heard it put that way, so I want to put it to your audience. When you politicize intelligence, what you're doing is you're saying who are the okay and the not okay people to collect on. And what we've done domestically in the United States with our law enforcement and our intelligence apparatus is say you can collect on violent domestic extremists that include militia people and anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists, which is like MAGA people. You can collect on so-called white supremacists or racially motivated violent extremists, but you can't look into it in the same way the international terrorism, because they're not the biggest threat. We already said it, and you heard a bunch of people clapping like seals when they did.
Right.
And when that happens, it's not just that there's a focus, there's money that goes along with it. And that includes SES bonuses when it comes to the FBI and other law enforcement that have senior executives. It means that they are focused, that there is an incentive structure that is set up that is well within that sort of deep state apparatus or the administrative state that runs these organizations. We're talking about money, priorities, and then real world consequences of putting your telescope into certain areas at the cost of other areas. And I have this horrible feeling, and I have for 18 months now, that we're going to see it come to fruition in the next 2 years, right underneath the nose of Donald Trump as he walks in. He's going to be inheriting a domestic mess. Not to mention,
Yeah.
we brought in 100,000 unvetted Afghan refugees, parolees, whatever you want to call them. They got flown in directly to America, and hundreds of those 100,000 just walked off. And they walked somewhere. They had phones, they had money, they disappeared into an Uber. The FBI wasn't tracking them, the State Department wasn't tracking them, the CIA wasn't tracking them, DHS didn't know where they went. They literally got into a car on the side of a highway in military bases outside of Fort Bliss or Holloman Air Force Base, and there was nothing to stop them from just disappearing into a network somewhere. And God knows what they're doing. And this has been something that some of us have been paying attention to for quite a while. We've just been waiting for this shoe to drop, and it's horrible and scary at the same time.
Yes. Okay. Hey, before we let you go, Kyle Seraphin, one last question about the New Orleans attack. There was an ISIS flag found with the vehicle. I've seen reports that it was inside the vehicle, but simultaneously we saw a pole on the back of the truck, and there was a lot of speculation. Did the FBI cover the flag after arriving at the scene? Do you have any? Have you seen enough to make sense of what happened?
I saw the flag pictures like everyone else did. It looked like it was in a bumper hitch. I saw it displayed for an evidence technician to take pictures of it on the ground. I saw initial denials of it. It sounded like maybe there was no wind. You're talking about an urban corridor on Bourbon Street where maybe there wasn't a lot of air movement.
Right.
And so you could imagine it being kind of a static flag hanging down. But it did look awfully tight to the pole. End of the day, it's hard to speculate on whether it was a cover-up or not.
Yeah.
If it was, I hope that in the next, let's say, 60 days, we get people to explain who did that, if they did, and why they thought that was operationally necessary and how that served the public interest. Because this goes to that culture we were talking about. The FBI is supposed to serve the American people. And if they go back to remembering that tax dollars pay for the information the FBI generates, we'll get less of this spy culture and secret agent culture and more of law enforcement culture, which means when we have information, we share it. If it doesn't interrupt, because it doesn't interrupt the investigation to say that there was a flag that everybody saw and that is all over social media. So this is indicative, I think, of a cultural failure of not exposing and being transparent. And the answer is almost always like it's less nefarious than you think. It's more like stupidity. It does take away from their credibility to the point of this last couple press conferences.
Yeah. And and you don't meddle with the crime scene. Hey, thank you very much, Kyle Seraphin, former FBI agent, host of the Kyle Seraphin Podcast. Sir, good to talk to you today. All right, line one, Matt in Rockville. Matt, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello. Hey, Matt.
Happy New Year's, Vince. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, so one of the things that, you were just talking with Kyle about the flag and the FBI's, focus on the incorrect thing.
Yeah.
When I saw the flag and unsure of if it was covered up or in the car, obviously there were questions about it. It took me back to May of 2023 when a U-Haul rammed the White House gates. And the FBI agent went and unfurled beautifully on the sidewalk a Nazi flag so that everyone could take pictures of it. Remember the flag with the folds that looked like it was just purchased? And I don't know if it was to try justifying going after this nebulous white supremacy that they can't seem to find. But it seems like maybe it's just hubris, but they certainly wanted to show that flag off, yet somehow this one we don't know much about.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, you're right about that. I just went back and I looked at the old articles on the subject. You're right. That U-Haul, it was 2023, and some dude by the name of Sai Varshith Kandula was driving a U-Haul, and he rammed into the gate right outside the Biden White House at the time, 2023. He had a Nazi flag in the car. He just purchased it on Amazon or something. They made a huge deal out of it at the time, but it's like pulling teeth to get details on the ISIS flag. I don't know why. All of these left-wing radicals everywhere with their flags. Unbelievable. All right, coming up, James Rosen will join us. Joe Biden spoke at Camp David last night. He was slurring his speech, and he had injuries on his face. What's the White House saying about this? James Rosen's been asking. Details ahead.